Today we have with us Dr. Ashis Nandy, who doesn't require any introduction by me, but I'd like to say that he is one of the most influential thinkers of our time and whose writings have influenced our thoughts, for over more than 4 decades. Uh, so without, going further into this, uh, Dr. Nandi, I would like to, begin with, I would like to know from you, your first book, which I think, if I remember correctly, it was published in 1980. Would you like to, remember your experience with your first book, and which was with OUP in 1980?
Well, that was the age of psychology, but it did not have been my first book. There was an earlier book, Alternative Sciences, which Ravi Dayal found very disturbing because both the reviewers rejected it, saying that it is all mythography. It is nothing to do with history. But I'm not a historian. I wrote like a psychologist. At that time, I was fresh from a clinic. So it was almost like a psychiatrist's report on two scientists. So, but I must say that I got my revenge when only few years after that, Oxford took up the book from Oriel Longmans and republished it in a much better version. So I am very happy with that book also. So that's that. It was a very fascinating setting. The official language here at Oxford University Press at that time was Bengali. Everybody spoke Bengali, though they were Bengalis were in a minority. Um, because the office had shifted only a few years earlier from Calcutta, lot of the staff were from Calcutta. So that's probably the reason. The interesting part of the story was this, that at that time, things moved very slowly, very casually, and in the algorithm of life itself probably was went slower. And it was a fantastic experience living with some of these people because the editors were then also stars. So people like Ravi Dayal, Rukun Advani and Salima Tayyabji were kind of a very self-confident and sometimes I would say extremely imaginative, and some of their editor, because I have seen their editing of other people's work also, I have often seen their editorial comments were more interesting than the book itself. They also had a fantastic printer, P.K. Ghosh of Calcutta. He was a legend. And his editorial comments, Andre Bete once told me, never ignore even one of them. They are very well thought out. If you will always learn something from his comments, and I did indeed.
And after that, almost 17 books with OUP, and with this new one, 18. Of course, we'll talk about it later. But I would like to know from you, how was the journey so far?
I have been very happy because one advantage of Oxford University Press is this, that once you have given the book, usually they are more interested in it than you are. And they're more particular about it than you are. There are narcissistic authors who think any suggestions or any editorial changes is an insult to their scholarship as well as to young persons. Who think that is an insult if you any editorial changes or even suggestions, and they have complained to me over the years that people in OUP don't really appreciate their style or some of their writings. And I have never had the heart to point out to them that I mean they were lucky because the changes have done a lot of good to the book. Because many times I would see the manuscript to write a blurb or something, and then they will send it to the OUP, and it will be unrecognizable when it is published. But that self-confident processing of the book has always been one of Oxford's main markers. Certainly, I'm very grateful that for that personally I have gained a lot from it.
So, in this journey, I'm sure that there were friends, colleagues, whose work have influenced greatly. So, among friends and colleagues, whom would you like to remember and like to talk about today?
Well, one of my most persistent readers always was Rajni Kothari, and my perhaps my most careful reader ever for many years was Giri Deshinkar. I do not know any of you will remember him. He was a sinologist. Uh, Both of them, Rajni, not only in terms of his careful reading of manuscripts and his very punchy, very aggressive, because he was a self-confident person, so was I. I always enjoyed this editorial tussles with my colleagues, with Salima Tayabji, who edited first half a dozen books of mine, and so on and so forth. I always enjoyed it. I immensely valued it. If an editor carefully reading your manuscript even mistakenly edits something, that shows there is something wrong with the text, because he is reading it carefully and then has made a mistake. You cannot expect that a reader will understand that part, or reader will get you the meaning you have tried to convey. So it needs a change. You may not change it the way editor says. You might change it a little differently, but it is always enjoyable. And I have gained immensely from my friends, people like Rajni Kothari and Giri Deshinkar. They're very difficult friends to please. And as far as writing style and things like that go, probably Rukun Advani is the most difficult one I have found to please.
So, when these things take place, a person needs a lot and lot of, intellectual independence. And for that, perhaps all of us need at some point a kind of mentor or mentors, who always help us, give us a kind of, roadmap and, show us the way. And of course, and at the end, we, go into that journey and see the, and experience that. So I would like to know from you, who is the person or the persons, behind the Ashis Nandy we know?
That's a difficult thing to say, because many a times the people who make you what you are, you do not even know that they have changed it. You interact with them as friends, you debate with them, you argue with them, and it turns after 4 or 5 years that what he was pushing was more a more sensitive account than you yourself assessed it. So it is, it becomes an amorphous mass by that time. But I would certainly like to mention my friend D.L. Sheth, the political sociologist. He has been a very challenging presence to me in my life. These were very sharp critics. I think in the Center for the Study of Developing Societies, to which I owe a lot, it was a very self-confident group, because we were so aggressive in our criticisms of each other that almost nothing escaped the eye of my colleagues. I am very grateful for that. I am very grateful for the care they have taken and the criticisms they offered. I am what I am partly because of them.
Before I
Later on, dear Nagraj played that role also in the 1980s, 1990s particular, 1990s.
Before I go and ask you about this book, I'm very much tempted to ask one more question. Cricket or classical music?
Perhaps classical music. That's a very interesting question. And I do think cricket has some characteristics of the classical music. that slow pace development and adumbration of a note or a phrase, that is also partly cricket. And that's the real attraction of cricket, was that it reveals a slice of life. It, you know, it resonates to the rhythm of life in this part of the world.